Imagine spending 1,000 years building the perfect impenetrable safe.
Right, like an absolute fortress.
Exactly. You survive empires rising and falling, and you're just incredibly confident your vault can never be cracked.
Yeah, you think you're untouchable.
But then a 21-year-old kid shows up, and he doesn't even try to pick the lock. He brings a cannon the size of a city bus and literally blows the entire door off its hinges.
It's just wild.
It is. And welcome to today's deep dive. We are incredibly excited to have you joining us because today we are unpacking the legendary fall of Constantinople in 1453.
It's honestly the ultimate paradigm shift. I mean, you are looking at the brutal, explosive end of the Byzantine Empire, which is, the very last remnants of Rome.
Right.
And at the same time, the absolute ascendance of the Ottoman Empire, all pivoting on just a few weeks of unimaginable military engineering.
Yeah, and to bring you the full scope of this, we've combed through a massive stack of sources.
We really have.
We've got an academic paper by Raymond Solga, a really dense historical encyclopedia entry, a deep dive on Wikipedia, specifically about this superweapon called the basilic cannon.
Which is terrifying, by the way.
Oh, totally terrifying. We also looked at an EBSCO historical summary, a huge Reddit discussion thread unpacking the tactics, and a YouTube documentary transcript detailing what was essentially an impossible military maneuver.
Yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover.
There is. So our mission for you today is to uncover exactly how this so-called impregnable bastion of the ancient world was finally toppled by Sultan Mehmed II using disruptive technology and just wild strategic imagination.
No, it really was imagination.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the fall, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the obstacle.
Definitely, because the city sits on that infamous peninsula, right, projecting out into the Bosphorus. So Mehmed was forced into this geographic chokehold.
You couldn't just surround it.
Exactly. He couldn't surround it effortlessly. And the land approach was totally blocked by the Theodosian walls, which were built way back in the 5th century. And honestly, calling them a wall just doesn't quite capture it.
No, it really doesn't.
It was a terrifying, mathematically precise meat grinder. It was designed to neutralize entire armies before they ever even swung a sword.
Right, because it was a layered defense system extending for like 19 kilometers.
19 kilometers of just solid fortification.
Yeah. An attacking force first had to negotiate a 20-meter wide, 7-meter deep moat, and the defenders could just flood it at will.
Which is awful. You're wading through that under heavy arrow fire.
And if you somehow survived the moat, you faced an outer wall with a patrol track. Behind that, a second wall heavily fortified with towers.
Right.
And then if you miraculously survived that absolute kill zone, you stared up at the inner wall, which was nearly 5 meters thick, 12 meters high, and studded with 96 projecting towers.
And all staggered to provide overlapping fields of fire. I mean, the altitude difference from the bottom of the moat to the top of the inner wall was roughly 30 meters of engineered death.
30 meters.
Yeah. And for 1,000 years, it worked flawlessly. I mean, it deflected the Arabs, the Rus, the Bulgars.
Everyone.
Right, everyone. It was designed so that by the time an enemy actually reached the primary physical barrier, their numbers, their energy, and their morale were just entirely depleted.
Which makes the raw numbers on the ground in April of 1453 so crazy to think about. Inside those massive walls, Emperor Constantine II was essentially commanding a ghost crew.
He really was.
He had fewer than 7,000 troops. That's about 5,000 Greeks and maybe 2,000 foreign mercenaries, mostly Genoese and Venetians.
Meanwhile, Mehmed II didn't just bring an army, he brought a human tidal wave.
Yeah, the estimates are wild.
Between 60,000 and 200,000 men. And he had to build a mind-boggling logistical supply chain just to feed and water an encampment of that size outside a hostile city.
Just the food alone, right?
Oh, absolutely. And his forces included his elite infantry, the Janissaries. And these guys weren't just standard foot soldiers.
No, they were elite.
Highly disciplined shock troops, master engineers, and essentially a psychological weapon in their own right, fiercely loyal to the Sultan.
But Mehmed knew history. I mean, 100,000 men crashing against the Theodosian walls would just result in 100,000 casualties.
Right. He needed an edge.
He needed an edge to physically break the stone.
Yeah.
And this is where we get the introduction of a guy named Urban, or Orban, depending on the source.
Yeah, the cannon guy.
Exactly. I view him essentially as this 15th century rogue defense contractor, like a rogue tech developer. He develops this world-ending proprietary hardware, and he aggressively shops it around to the highest bidder.
He actually pitched his services to Emperor Constantine Asia first.
Wait, he went to the Byzantines first.
He did, but the Byzantine treasury was effectively bankrupt. They couldn't meet his asking price, and they definitely didn't possess the massive stockpiles of raw bronze and powder needed to actually build his designs.
Wow. So Urban simply walks across the metaphorical street and pitches Mehmed II.
Pretty much.
He promises the young sultan a cannon capable of shattering the walls of Babylon itself. And Mehmed instantly recognizes the value of the disruption, and he pays him 4 times his asking price.
4 times.
Yeah, and the result is the Basilica Cannon. This thing, it defies belief for the era. Our sources say it was 27 feet long, with solid bronze walls 8 inches thick.
Just massive.
And it was designed to fire stone balls weighing 1,200 pounds over a mile.
The logistics of weaponizing it were staggering. I mean, it was cast in Adrianople, and it required a massive convoy just to move it the 140 miles to Constantinople.
Right, because you can't just put that on a normal cart.
No, you're talking about a team of up to 90 oxen and 400 men inching it forward over 3 months. They had to build reinforced bridges along the way just so the weight wouldn't collapse the roads.
But looking at the tactical reality, I have to wonder how effective this actually was in a live combat scenario. Like, wait, if this thing was so massive and took 3 months just to drag to the battlefield, wasn't it a total logistical nightmare to actually use?
Oh, completely. And what's fascinating here is that the weapon had massive flaws. You're hitting on the core paradox of early gunpowder artillery.
It was fragile.
Incredibly fragile in its own monstrous way. The intense thermal shock generated by detonating that much black powder, combined with impurities in the cast bronze, meant it could only be fired about 7 times a day.
7 times? Wait, you have 100,000 men waiting, and your super weapon fires every few hours.
Yeah, and the turnaround was terrifying for the crew. After every single discharge, the barrel had to be painstakingly swabbed and soaked in warm oil.
Warm oil.
Yeah, because if they didn't, the sudden influx of cool ambient air against the superheated metal would cause these microscopic hairline fractures.
Oh, that sounds dangerous.
Extremely. Eventually, those fractures gave way. Despite all the precautions, the immense recoil and pressure caused the bronze barrel to literally split apart after just 6 weeks.
Wow.
It killed several of its own operators. But, you know, the psychological terror it inflicted was just as devastating as the physical damage.
I can imagine. The sheer acoustic violence of a 1,200-pound boulder slamming into a 1,000-year-old wall, it shook the ground.
Yeah, it was deafening.
But even with the cannons turning the land walls to rubble by day, the city didn't immediately fall. The defenders adapted, didn't they?
They did. They used brilliant, desperate engineering. By night, under the cover of darkness, men, women, and children would rush to the breaches. I mean, they couldn't carve new stone, so they just used what they had.
With barrels and rocks.
Exactly. They filled empty wooden barrels with earth and rubble, and they stacked them in the gaps.
And ironically, that makeshift dirt and wood barrier actually absorbed the kinetic energy of the cannonballs far better than the rigid, brittle stone of the original walls.
It's crazy how that worked out.
It really is.
Yeah.
So it created this exhausting, dynamic, stalemate on the land approach. Mehmed is grinding his gears. He realizes he can't just punch through the front door.
Right.
He needs to attack the structurally weaker seawalls along the water. But the water was blocked.
Yeah, the Golden Horn Harbor was sealed off by a massive floating iron chain. It stretched completely across the water, physically blocking any Ottoman naval vessels from entering.
And behind that chain...
Behind that chain sat a superior, battle-hardened fleet of Venetian and Genoese ships. They patrolled those calm waters, maintaining a secure supply line and ensuring the seawalls remained totally untouched.
Which brings us to one of the most incredible tactical pivots in military history. Mehmed realizes he can't break the chain, so he decides to outthink it.
He really goes outside the box.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's exactly like finding a back door in an unhackable cybersecurity firewall. You know?
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like you don't break the wall, you just walk around it. Mehmed went analog.
He bypassed the system entirely. Just north of the harbor was the steep, heavily wooded terrain known as the Galata Hills. And Mehmed commanded his engineers to carve a path directly over that mountain.
Over a mountain.
Literally, from the Bosphorus straight down into the supposedly secure Golden Horn Harbor.
Using a railed road of logs, right?
Yep, logs slicked with animal fat and olive oil.
And then, on the night of April 21st, they execute the impossible. Using laborers, sailors, and oxen, they drag 70 Ottoman ships uphill over the land in the dark.
70 warships, uphill.
So how did the defenders react? I mean, waking up and seeing an entire enemy fleet on the wrong side of the chain by dawn on April 22nd.
Well, according to that YouTube documentary transcript we reviewed, it completely shattered their illusion of invincibility. From a tactical standpoint, it was devastating.
Because their flank was exposed.
Exactly. The tiny defending army, with only about 7,000 men, now had to pull desperately needed soldiers away from the crumbling land walls to guard the vast expanse of the weaker seawalls.
It just stretched them so thin.
Mehmed seized the tempo. He forced them out of a planned defense and turned their strategy into pure reactive panic.
And with their physical defenses bypassed and their forces stretched to the absolute limit, sheer exhaustion set in. And then it's like the heavens themselves seemed to turn against the city.
Oh, the psychological collapse was immense. You have a 47-day continuous bombardment expending something like 55,000 pounds of gunpowder.
Just constant noise and vibration.
Exactly. And then the omens start. On May 22nd, there was a terrifying lunar eclipse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was followed by a violent thunderstorm, a naturally thick fog, and reports of a mysterious pulsating red glow hovering over the massive dome of the Hagia Sophia.
I mean, when you are fighting for 47 straight days, running out of food, and you look up to see a bleeding moon and glowing church, it's very easy to conclude that God has officially signed off on your destruction.
Absolutely. And that psychological collapse directly led to the human errors that caused the city's actual fall.
Right, because the human element is what breaks. Like with the Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani.
Yeah, he was the linchpin of the land defense, brilliant commander. But during a massive assault, he is severely wounded and retreats.
And when he leaves, morale just plummets.
The fragile coalition shatters. The mercenary troops see their invincible commander retreat and just assume the battle is lost.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the infamous Kirkaporta Gate. It's accidentally left open.
Right, just unlocked.
The elite Janissaries spot it, flood in, and suddenly their flag is flying over the city. Now, we saw a lot of debate in that Reddit discussion thread, with users making jokes about the open gate being an inside job or some grand conspiracy.
Oh, yeah, people love a conspiracy.
But I have to push back on that. When you're fighting for 47 straight days, running out of food, and getting blasted by the biggest cannon in human history, someone is eventually going to make a mistake and leave a door unlocked. It's not a conspiracy, it's sheer human exhaustion.
I completely agree. And really, the city was already deeply fractured internally before the gate was ever left open.
The political divisions were wild.
Yeah, the Reddit thread highlighted this perfectly. The Byzantine Megadu, Lucas Notaras, a key leader, literally stated he would rather see a Turkish turban in the city than a Latin mitre.
Meaning he preferred Islamic rule over Catholic rule.
Exactly. The religious infighting doomed them from the start. And the West didn't help much either, because the 100 Years' War was ending and the Holy Roman Empire was decentralized. There was a total lack of unified European support.
They were totally on their own, and so the walls are breached, the city falls. Emperor Constantine XI famously discards his imperial status markers, like his purple boots, right?
Yeah, so he wouldn't become a trophy. He dies fighting in the streets, which actually sparks the enduring legend that he was rescued by an angel and encased in marble beneath the city.
Wow. So the city falls, and we see 3 days of horrific looting and enslavement begin, which was standard for medieval warfare.
Brutal, but standard.
But what happens on day 4? Because the aftermath is shockingly different from what anyone expected.
It really is. After 3 days, Mehmed II, who is now known as Mehmed the Conqueror, halts the pillaging.
He just stops it?
Yeah. He claims the Hagia Sophia as a mosque, but surprisingly, he does not destroy the Christian presence.
This blew my mind. He actually frees the respected Orthodox Christian scholar Gennadius.
Right.
He grants him tax exemption and personal inviolability. And Christians are allowed to keep many of their churches, like the Church of the Holy Apostles.
He organized them into what was called a millet, which was essentially a self-governing community.
So what does this all mean? I point this out because it's so counterintuitive.
It really is.
You'd expect a medieval conqueror to wipe the slate clean and assert total dominance. Instead, he acts almost like a modern venture capitalist acquiring a distressed company.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. He retains the core talent and infrastructure because he knows it's good for the bottom line. He forced and encouraged Christians, Armenians, and tradesmen from other regions to move to the city, demanding they build grand houses, baths, and marketplaces.
To return the city to its former massive scale.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Mehmed's cosmopolitan attitude was incredibly rare for the time.
Very rare.
He recognized that a thriving capital needed a diversity of thought, a diversity of trade, and skill. And honestly, for you listening, it's worth noting that true leadership and long-term success often require abandoning rigid ideology in favor of pragmatic integration.
It's an incredible lesson. So to briefly recap our journey today, we looked at the clash of an ancient, thousand-year-old fortress against disruptive gunpowder technology.
Yep. The Basilica Cannon
We saw the sheer lateral thinking of moving a whole fleet over a mountain in the dark.
still blows my mind.
And finally, the pragmatic rebuilding of a fallen empire into a completely new economic and cultural hub.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final unmentioned ripple effect that I pulled from the sources.
Oh, what's that?
Well, when Constantinople fell, many Greek scholars didn't just stay. They fled, taking whatever they could carry, and they went to Italy. And while they didn't single-handedly start the Italian Renaissance, this massive influx of ancient texts and classical knowledge added absolute fuel to the fire of that cultural explosion.
Wow.
So think about how the destruction of the greatest center of learning in the East didn't extinguish that knowledge. Instead, like seeds blown by a violent storm, it scattered and sparked an intellectual awakening that completely reshaped the Western world.
That's amazing.
So my challenge to you listening is this. What disasters or major disruptions in your own life or your industry might actually just be the scattering of seeds for a massive renaissance somewhere else?
That is such a powerful thought to end on. Sometimes the walls have to fall for the seeds to scatter. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening, everyone.